the Recovery 2.0 conference. I'm your host, Tommy Rosen, and today I am so pleased to be speaking with my friend, Nikki Myers. Nikki, hey Nikki. Nikki is an accomplished teacher and practitioner on the path of yoga. Born out of her personal struggles with addiction, Nikki is a co-founder of the acclaimed Yoga of 12-Step Recovery program known as Y12SR. It was featured in the New York Times and Yoga Journal. Y12SR brings together the power of the 12 steps with the mind-body practices of yoga and meditation. It presents a new meeting format which has sprung out of this combination, and today there are nearly 100 Y12SR meetings around the country, and it is spreading like wildfire. Nikki has a book coming out with Sounds True called Namaste Motherfucker, which promises to be a powerful look at Nikki's journey from the darkness of addiction back into wholeness. Nikki, as always, such a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you for being a part of the Recovery 2.0 conference. Welcome.
Thank you, Tommy, and it's an honor for me to be a part of this conference, and I'm just so grateful. I saw it from its very beginning and what it's grown into and what it means to so many people, and I'm so deeply grateful to be a part of it.
Well, thank you, Nikki. As I hope you realize, you're a big inspiration behind it. Because really, when I first met you and Rolf and saw the work that you guys were doing, you guys have held the torch and lit a path forward for me and many other people who are teaching this work. So thank you so much.
Love it. I love it. And wait, congratulations on the book. I'm struggling. I'm getting there. Oh my God. So I'm really appreciating the process that I know you went through to get that out.
Yes.
And Congratulations on it. It's wonderful. And again, I see the influence it's having on so many people.
Thank you, Nikki, so much. And like I've said to you before, well, on this topic of finishing a book, I actually have no advice. I have no advice.
How helpful is that? Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, Nikki, today I would love to speak with you about your organization, Y12SR, and I'd like people to understand the work that you're doing at a deeper level. And my idea is to hold up a real light on this amazing work, and I want people to take interest in it, and I want them to get involved in it. That's the purpose of this interview today. So how did Y12SR originally come into being? What was your intention?
Oh my God. It actually came out of my own personal history, just like that little bio says, of addiction, relapse, recovery, the whole 9 yards. And just a brief part of my story is the disease of addiction took me down. When in 12-step programs, they talk about jails, institutions, and death. I feel like I experienced all of those. Definitely the jails and institution parts, and the death was watching so many people around me succumb, and still watching so many people around me succumb from the disease of addiction. Witty, bright, brilliant, wonderful people who are no longer in this plane of existence due to drugs, alcohol, or some other form of addiction. And so I watched that. And then, so that's the death, but it was also the death of my own soul and my own being. And so, you know, I first found the 12-step program in 1987. Very gratefully found the rooms, and the 12-step program absolutely positively saved my life. It saved my life.
Yes.
I always talk about how when I came into the rooms, and part of my history is commercial sex work. It's divorce, death, physical, mental, spiritual, all kinds of abuse. So in so many ways, you know, this disease really took me out. And when I found the 12-step program, I found a bunch of people there who could love me and did love me till I could learn to love myself. And it was a beautiful thing. I walked in the rooms, I couldn't put a sentence together. it was difficult to put a sentence together. And people there supported me and loved me, and I'm so deeply, deeply, deeply grateful for that. And so I got clean, and in the first 8 years in recovery, a lot of things happened. I went back to school, made some amends and things, and repaired relationships. All kinds of really wonderful things happened. When I went back to school, I ended up finishing my undergrad degree, and I finished that with, I finished it summa cum laude, so straight freaking A's, right? And then I went on to do an MBA and finished that delta cum laude. So I always say I still got a little resentment with this one teacher that gave me a B. I got one B in the whole thing. Operations. I'm still holding a little resentment. I'm working on that. Anyway, but I graduated that, delta cum laude. And then I was working for a software company. I had an aptitude in software. And working for a software company, and they ended up sending me all around the globe doing presentations about different software products and some things that I was working on with a group of engineers there in the software domain. And long story short, I ended up in Amsterdam, and I first ended up in Germany. And here's the real trip about this, and I want to reinforce this because it's part of the story of Y12SR. The trip to Europe was horrendous, and it was long, drawn out, all of that. I end up in Germany, which was the first stop, hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. 12-step program talks about that and says don't make great decisions when you allow yourself to get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Well, I was dealing with, by the time I got there, all four of those. And I walked into a conference dinner. I hadn't had any food. And the only thing that was being served at that point was dessert. Dessert happened to be orange sherbet served in champagne. And, yeah. And out of the hunger and all that, I made the decision to go for it, right? And I did that. And again, the piece of this story that's significant is I was staying in a beautiful room in a beautiful spa-like hotel, and I got back to my room, and there's a mini bar in the room, full of food and drink and everything.
Yes.
And I opened the mini bar. I compare it to the last scene in the Denzel Washington movie Flight.
Just thinking of that.
That's exactly it. That was me. That's exactly what I did. The mini bar was just about completely done by the next morning, and it was just that cycle. And this is what blows me away about that, right? And this is what we talk about with relapse prevention and reintegration. With Y12SR, I hadn't had a drink or a drug for 8 years. For 8 years, right? But invoked by hungry, angry, lonely, and tired, triggered by those things, I went back to a pattern. In yoga, we call it the samskara, that's sitting there. A pattern that was sitting there dormant for 8 years. And all of a sudden, I'm back. I'm in the throes of this thing again. I soon left by the time it was all said and done, and there's a timepiece in there. But I left Germany, ended up in Amsterdam, right? And on the streets of Amsterdam, found my drug of choice, right? Easily found my drug of choice. Now, again, remember, these were behaviors that I had not used at all for 8 years. I've been clean. My whole life has changed.
Just like riding a bicycle.
Right back doing like riding a bicycle. The same thing. I knew what to do in a foreign freaking country.
Yep.
To go get my drug of choice.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. And that blows my mind.
That's how we do it.
It blows my mind. So, I get, this is a practice, not a perfect, it doesn't go away. And that's why program talks about vigilance. We don't do our yoga practice just once. and expect it to take fruit, right? It's something we do. We continually do. We keep coming back, as we say. We keep coming back to it. So another long story short, I make it back to the States finally and find my way back in the room, starting all over again as far as clean time, sustainable clean time. And then I found yoga again. So I was introduced to yoga in the early 70s, and I knew something was there. I knew something was there. And, but, you know, the life kind of steered me away from it, drugs and sex and alcohol and all that kind of stuff. And so when I came back, I found my way back into first a Bikram yoga class, and then took up the Ashtanga series and found an Ashtanga teacher living in Boston, found an Ashtanga teacher, a wonderful Ashtanga teacher, and really got involved with the practice, started doing just a little bit of teaching. She would go away for months at a time and study with Pattabhi Jois in India, and she was teaching in an inner city school in the greater Boston area, and so I'd sub for her for those classes, and that was when I really got what was going on at a different level than the physical, because I watched those kids before and after the practice and the set of focus that came in, what changed just as a result of, you know, it was easier for me to see it in them, right? What was going on with them. And the school administrators loved it. They'd say, for at least a couple of hours after you leave, we can do our job, right? We can really focus. We're not so much dealing with disciplinary issues. We've got these kids focused for this time. And so that was when I started really getting into the philosophy. I'm like, something else really is going on here. What's going on? And so I started to really deepen my own study and application of yoga and its practices. So I went along that way, and I'm clean. This is a new period of clean time. I stayed clean that way for 4 years, right? Deepening my study, doing teacher trainings, doing all kind of stuff. And then 4 years clean, and I decided I don't need 12-step programs. I decided I just don't need that anymore, and I throw those out the window.
Just yoga.
I'm going to do it with this new silver bullet that I found.
Just yoga.
Yes.
Okay.
And just yoga, right? And you know, I wanted those, a relatively new teacher. Yoga practice is the answer for everything, right? You got a hangnail, do 3, you know, chakravakas. You know, it's like that, right? So this is going to solve this for me. And I end up relapsing again. 4 years clean, I relapse again. And by this time, I'm like, WTF? You know, what the heck is going on? You know, it doesn't make sense to me. By this time, I know I'm smart, right? I know I got some brains, right? And, you know, what, again, I discovered, and I say this all the time, is that your intellect can lead you right to a coffin, right? And again, we've seen many examples of this. Philip Seymour Hoffman still tugs at my heart because, you know, I look at his brilliance. It's a brilliant man, right? A brilliant person who knew, who'd been around recovery, who knew, right? And went back and ended up in a coffin, right? And so it's something that I remember all the time. And so it was after that point that I recognized, at least for an addict like me, for someone like me, that I needed to marry these two. That the physical, we talk in the 12-step program about addiction as a physical, mental, and spiritual disease. And a lot is done in the rooms relative to the mental. There's what I like to term a toe tap into you know, spiritual processes. They talk about prayer and meditation, but then, you know, nothing's really taught around prayer and meditation. And the physical is pretty much left out altogether, right? So, but we speak about it in terms as a physical, mental, and spiritual disease. And for this addict, I needed something that truly married these 3 things, that they could not be separated for a platform for recovery for me. And really it was out of that, working with several incredible teachers, you know, Aruni out of Kripalu, and my teacher, Gary Kraftsoul, and my mentor and teacher, Sean Korn, you know, that this thing, why 12SR really came together. And just to kind of close that little piece down, it's now been 14 years since that last relapse.
I love it.
So, me too. It's
Love
been
it.
14 years since that last relapse. And so, I'm just deeply, deeply, deeply grateful. And we, again, call this a platform for relapse prevention based on Yoga Sutra 216. You and I have talked about that one many times. Heya Dukkha Anagatam. Future suffering can be avoided. It can be avoided. And so we use this as long as we recognize that what is happening is more than just mine, right? We talk, the issues are in our tissues, right? So there's got to be a way of releasing from other places as well.
Yes.
So that's how it all came about. And then I saw that there were a lot of other addicts just like me that needed that kind of thing, that needed this integration in this way. And when that happened, I could not go ahead and do what Y12SR has become. And it's just organic platform that just is taken off almost by itself.
Yes. Well, you coined, as far as I understand, you actually coined the term, the issues are in your tissues.
I have no earthly idea if I'm the actual, nothing's new on the sun.
Right.
But boy, yes. I remember when it came out. I remember thinking about how brilliant I am when it came out. But you know how that is, right?
Yes.
And so I'd love to take credit for that. I'd love to.
Well, I'm giving you credit for that, and I want to know more about it for our listeners who I really want. Imagine we're being watched right now by some people who are not familiar with this mind-body piece, and so I want to spotlight that for them. Could you help them understand what you mean by that?
Absolutely. The yogis, the ancients, one of the most wonderful graphics I've ever seen around this came from integral yoga. One of the other yoga teachers I did some study with a while back is Nishala Devi. And she's just a beautiful, beautiful, brilliant woman. She was a Swami at one point in time at integral yoga. Actually, she's the person that wrote the yoga protocol for Dr. Dean Ornish's program around the reversal of heart disease using yoga as a primary component. And so I did some study with her around working for people with cancer and people with heart disease. And she had this graphic that integral yoga uses that talks about mind, body, and spirit, and talks about how, although we view them as individual, they're really all the same thing. And what they use is H2O. So 2 atoms of hydrogen, 1 atom of oxygen, making up the molecule H2O. But that one molecule H2O can take different forms. In its solid form, it's ice, right? And in this illustration, in our solid form, we're body, right? In the liquid form, H2O is water, right? In that analogy, it's mind. Our mind moves and flows and changes and does things like water, right? And then in its gas form, H2O is steam or vapor, right? And ours is spirit, that amorphous spirit, right? But really, it's all H2O. It's all the same substance. It can just take different forms. Anything you do to one affects all the others. And it's the same with our being, mind, body, and spirit. It's really all the same thing. It's all the same thing. And so just relieving and talking about a solution for recovery on only one basis leaves the rest of the stuff there to still be dealt with. And believe me, the issues do live in our tissues. There's just so much that gets stored at this cellular level that needs to be released. And yoga is an incredible homeostasis-based practice that allows us to release those issues in our tissues and come back to a state of balance.
Do you look at the yoga practice in a similar way? You kind of referenced it earlier, where we talk a lot about one day at a time and keep coming back in 12-step speak. And the idea there is that each day we have another opportunity essentially to recover, if you will. Do you look at a yoga practice in the same way that it's something that you do, maybe you don't do it every day, but you do it often, and you're constantly sort of tuning the system, if you will?
Absolutely. For me, and there's so many ways to do a yoga practice that I really do consciously, when I'm directing my attention, moving with breath, right? No matter what I'm doing. You know, if I'm in that awareness, I'm doing yoga, right? And that's part of the things that we talk about in Y12SR. What we look to do in Y12SR is give folks what we call, for lack of a better word, the Y12SR interventions, right? To just ways to stop in your day and bring this thing into your life, right? For example, one of them is that keep coming back, that little phrase we say all the time in 12-step program. Well, that's really an embodiment. I can embody, keep coming back. You know, the question becomes, what am I coming back to, right? So when we teach mountain pose, Tadasana, right? Connecting with the earth beneath you, connecting with the universe and all, whatever it is that you talk to and speak with up there, you know, connecting to all the resource that's above, right? Hugging that energy in, bringing that back in my body. That's a physical manifestation that I can keep coming back to, right? And have it show up. And when I do that, we do this little exercise, you know, someone will come up to you and push you over, right? Because I'm scattered. I'm thinking about things all over the place. My mind's not focused or directed. I'm scattered, right? But when I find Tadasana in my body, right, it's much more challenging to push me over. I'm no longer a pushover, right? And that's the whole idea. So I can keep coming back on a daily basis to that, right? So all those little phrases are embodiments. They show up in our bodies, right?
I
And they become little bitty interventions that, you know, I can notice during my day. Oh my God, I'm all over the place. You know, I'm in the future, I'm in the past, I'm not present. Keep coming back. I can keep coming back, right? It brings me back into present time.
I love it. And Nikki, for the folks that may not understand the concept of emotion as energy, and that what the yogi is trying to do with that energy is process through. Can you speak a little bit about that to bring us to a state of presence?
Absolutely. My favorite thing from this came from, I do work at a wonderful treatment center that you know about in Buffalo Gap, Texas, Shades of Hope, that focuses primarily on eating disorder, but I love that center because they treat all addiction. You know, all addiction is treated in there. You know, if you go in there for a specific focus, and I love that. They work to get it root. And I really love that. But they start everything they do there with names, claims, and feelings. Your name is your name. Your claim is how you look and diagnose yourself. Because until you take that first step and diagnose yourself, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen, right? So coming to what is and the truth about what is relative to what's going on in your life. But the last part is feelings. And what they do there is they have what's called a feeling chart. And the two things that they show on the feeling chart is what happens when a feeling is carried or denied, and what happens when a feeling is allowed to move, right? And a feeling is energy, and the nature of energy is to move. So when it moves, there's one outcome. When it's held, grasped, or any of that, there's a completely different outcome, right? And so the idea is to, look at the feeling. And if you're holding it, carrying it, denying it, any of those kinds of things, then it becomes something different. And here's an example. And the point is, there's nothing good, bad, right, wrong about any feeling, about any emotion. It's nothing good is not in the domain of the binary thing of good, bad, right, and wrong, right? Instead, if it's allowed to do what it does, what it wants to do, which is to move, it creates one thing. If it's carried or held or grasped, like the Yoga Sutras talk about, if it's grasped, then it creates something different. So, an example is anger. Anger that's carried or denied will produce rage. But anger is an energy that's allowed to move and flow, can produce strength, it can produce motivation, it can produce a very useful energy, in order to support what it is that we're up to in the world, right? It's a useful energy. But if it's carried or denied, it has a different outcome. There's a different thing that happens. And so that's funny.
And so, the process of yoga allows us to move these energies through?
Exactly. We get to look at how we carry into yoga's awareness, breath, and movement, right? So when I look at how I'm carrying feelings, right? A lot of times, many times, they may not even be mine. I'm carrying somebody else's feelings, right? But I get to look at that and go, wow, with the awareness that yoga teaches me, this isn't even mine. Let's move this bad boy, right? Let's get this stuff moving. And denial, like we talk about in the 12-step program, they say it's an acronym for don't even know I'm lying. I don't even know I'm lying.
I love it.
Denial, right? And so coming out of denial, I get to let that energy move. I get to allow that energy to move. And when it moves, it produces something completely different.
Now, Y12SR, so originally, obviously coming out of your own experience and seeing so many people who struggle with at least a relapse, if not many relapses, originally it's sort of categorized as a relapse prevention program.
Right.
And so maybe can you speak a little bit about that beginning, that idea, that intention, and then where it's grown into today, what you've seen?
Yeah. It's been amazing. So it started in 2003. I think the first set of we started out with this thing that we call the intensive that we still do. And we call that the piece for understanding and application about how these things fit together. And that started out, I think the first one was in 2004, somewhere in that time frame. So it's been going for a while now. It's morphed into other things. Out of that came these ongoing meetings that you were speaking about a little bit earlier. We started doing that when we were doing them here where I live in Indianapolis, Indiana. People started wanting to get together more frequently. And what that kind of turned into was a 12-step based discussion group. And then directly after that, a themed, trauma-informed, really a specific yoga practice based in this 12-step and introducing the quote-unquote interventions and all of that kind of stuff.
How long was that entire process? That was like 2, maybe at most 3 years after we first started. We'd done enough of them. People wanted to have this meeting out of them. And the meeting, how long would the meeting actually last? What was that time?
2 hours.
A 2-hour meeting.
Right. And the first part kind of looks like a 12-step meeting. We read a format. These are the ground rules. This is a 12-step based discussion. We talk about this. Usually someone will bring up a topic or we'll have a reading or something like that, right? And then, following the ground rules and doing the deal, we have this discussion. And then directly after that was the themed yoga practice. And I was doing the yoga practice and all that kind of stuff. And then it started growing. And people from other parts of the country started coming to the weekend intensives. And the question became, how can we bring this back into our own communities? And that was when we developed what's called the leadership training program. And leadership is kind of an odd phrase to use. It really isn't. Not so much leadership from that perspective. There are no real leaders, but it's the person that's facilitating the yoga practice. What they really are space holders. We're space holders. We create and protect the safe, sacred space that yoga tells us healing can happen. Yoga says, we're talking about energy. This phrase I got from Matthew Sanford, who I dearly love. He told me, prana will only move when it feels safe. It will only move. Prana or energy will only move when it feels safe. So my job is to hold, and even as a yoga teacher, my job is to hold safe, sacred space so that energy can move. And so, that's what we teach in the leadership, part of what we teach in the leadership training program, so that people can go back into their own communities. And then, like you said earlier, out of that, there are over 200 now active Y12SR leaders, very active Y12SR leaders. There's more, it's getting close to 300, right? Active Y12SR leaders. And I don't even know, I can't keep count anymore of how many we've trained over the course of the years. But there are, 100 plus meetings going on across the country. And it's just kind of been this organic thing that has rolled out that is proving to be beneficial and helpful to folks to sustainably stay clean. Now, your question was, what have I seen in over the course of these years?
Yes.
And again, it very much is relapse prevention, but we're discovering that a very deep, integral part of relapse prevention is self-reintegration, right? I told you earlier about my story and, what addiction took me into. And when I introduced myself, and I don't care if I'm speaking to, the most famous group of psychologists, psychiatrists, or the White House, I don't care, right? I'm going to say the same thing. I'm all of these things. I'm an addict, alcoholic, codependent, survivor of childhood and adult sexual trauma, a love addict, a recovering debtor spender, all of that. I played whack-a-mole with the disease for a while, right? All of that is a part of me. All of that's a part of me, right? And I'm an MBA. I'm a yoga therapist. I'm, a somatic therapist. I'm the mother of 2 living, 1 deceased child. I am, the grandmother of 5, right? All of those things inform who this being is. Right? And none of them really define me, but all of those inform who I am. And so the reintegration process has been not making any part of myself bad, awful, and wrong. Because that's what I did before. I created a split in me. I said, this part's good, this part's bad, and I'm going to try and get rid of the bad, and I'm back in the binaries. And yoga, really, for me, part of this big process is moving beyond binary, is moving out beyond the duality, beyond all that stuff. It's been reintegrating all parts of myself, and they're great, really wonderful attributes. I don't have to be in the behavior anymore of commercial sex work. I'm not in that behavior anymore. But I don't have to throw her out the window. She was pretty fierce and bold and cool. And those are qualities that I can use to move forward what's most important to me in my life, right? Connection with other people, service in the world. Those are all qualities that work. So we're discovering Y12SR as this platform for self-reintegration. And I've seen a lot of people begin to really take on that work of reintegrating all parts of themselves.
Yes.
Through the 12-step program, through yoga, through what the yogic philosophy talks about, we have 6 spheres of influence, right? Our body, our breath, our mind, then our diet, which you and I have been talking about a whole lot. That's a sphere of influence, right? Our diet, our lifestyle, our environment, right? These are all spheres of influence that we can use to influence the direction of change, right? Change is going to happen. It's inevitable. That's the way it is, right? But we can influence the direction of change by looking at these 6 spheres of influence. And for me, and so that's what we're seeing. And one more little piece about this.
Please.
What I've seen over and over again, and for me, the root of this, a root of a lot of this, is this deal we call codependency, right? Now, I'm not a big fan of that word. It doesn't, the codependent or any of that, it's defined in so many ways. It's so nebulous and all of that. But the definition that I've come to love is that codependence is the disease of the lost self. Number one, we lose ourselves. It's the disease of looking outside ourselves from only something that can come from inside of ourselves. The disease of looking elsewhere, right? Of looking elsewhere. And so, and by that definition, every addict has to be a codependent. By that we looked elsewhere for it in drugs and alcohol and sex and food, whatever. Every addict. You have by that definition, every addict's a codependent. So we're looking at codependent behavior, right? Which is really about my relationship with myself, right? And looking at codependent behavior is the root, right, of all addictions. So, within Y12SR now we have the leadership training, we have the intensive, these ongoing meetings, and recently we developed this whole thing around transforming the samskara, the patterning of codependence, which I'm loving doing that work. It to me is kind of like some core process work around this stuff that comes from the body.
So I want to get into this codependency thing. Just one piece of business I want to jump back to. What happens when we deny parts of ourselves?
We create a split, right? We become at war. We get to be at war with ourselves, right? And yoga is union, integration, balance, wholeness. Right? So we create this state of imbalance when we've got splits within ourselves, right? So we create the non-state, the opposite of yoga, when we have these splits within ourselves. And like I said, for me, I was at war with myself, Oh my God, there's angry Nikki. She's bad. She's awful. She's wrong, right? And then I was trying to suppress her. And you suppress something, it comes out sideways. It comes out in ways that definitely you don't want it to come out, right? Because then I'm back to I'm holding, I'm grasping, I'm denying, I'm carrying, right? So it comes out as rage rather than if you just allow it to move and be with what's happening.
Yes.
I think I was just saying, if you watch it move. Right?
Yes.
Anger will turn to forgiveness. Forgiveness will become joy.
Sure. So the question I have is for people who are coming from a shame-based place, and they're hearing what you're saying today, and they're thinking things like, I can't forgive myself for these things. I can't get over some of these things that I've done.
Yeah. The
way I feel about myself. How has this woman been able to find this forgiveness, to bring this integration into her being? What might we say to someone in that position?
Wow, I love that. I love that you brought it up. What we say in program again is all these things. It really, really, really is simple. It's simple. It's not easy. It's not at all easy. But the things are really simple, right? And it is this integration of things. It's this integration of things that is facilitated by me, by the yoga practice and the yoga process of awareness and being in my body, not running. Because my tendency, that acronym FEAR, mine's fuck everything and run. It gets hard. It gets hard. I want to cut and run, right? And so yoga teaches us stay present. It's not going to move. It's not going to heal unless you stay present. And then it gives us the grounding tools in order to do that, in order to stay present. So once I can stay present with that stuff, there are lots of processes for beginning to bring everybody back home. I did some work I love experiential therapies and have done a lot of work in some experiential stuff. And this is the example for me. I was telling you I made the commercial sex worker, the prostitute self, Nikki, bad, awful, and wrong. She was horrible. She was bad. One of the things that I did in order to work to reintegrate her and bring her in was some work that's called empty chair work, right? And so it's just this little process where I imagine she's sitting in one chair across from me, Nikki present as I am today, because all of that's a part of me, just like baby Nikki is a part of me. I can feel 6 years old sometimes. The 7-year-old is still in there. Right?
Oh, yeah, me too.
And so she's in there too. She's in there too, the prostitute Nikki. So I had her sitting across from me on one side, I'm sitting on the other, and we just had a conversation. We just had a conversation. I got to really take a look at what was going on with her and making the decisions that she made, right? And then I'd flip to the other side. And I talk from who I am today to her, right? So it was just one of the pieces, and you can do that through letter writing, you can do that through journaling, you can do it through, many, many, many ways to get at that, right? But this was just an example of a wonderful process, yet another tool of this whole thing. In the tool basket to bring everybody in and to bring everybody back. And like I said, what I discovered was, she was pretty fierce. There are parts of her I really like, and so.
Now, is somebody facilitating that process? Is that something that you can do by yourself, or in what you're describing, were you doing it with a third party or a second party present, I guess?
Both. I learned it with a group. I continued it on my own, right? And and I've done some training in that work, like a year and a half ago, and I love to facilitate it now. I love facilitating that work. Mm-hmm. So, and, it's one of my long-term goals, at some point in time, yes. Really putting some groups together to facilitate that kind of work.
Nikki,
so, like I said, you can do it. Well, I learned it in a group, but part of the process is having a tool to take away with you.
Yes. Oh, well, I love it. I mean, that's amazing work, and thank you for that example, because I bet I can imagine myself through journaling.
Yep.
Having that let's see, I'll go ahead and I'll connect with myself when my one of the things I still carry is that my mom, 2 months before my mom died, she saw me relapse.
Wow.
And so this is not something that destroys my life today. However,
right.
When I think and focus my mind on that, if I could take that one back, I would change that. I would change that. So maybe, maybe a little work there. And I think for people who are watching, we could direct their attention to something that maybe it was the one that they would take back if they could.
Yep.
Maybe some work there. Wow. So Nikki, how do people get involved? So you've got your leadership training.
Yep.
And can anybody become what you referred to as a space holder for a Y12SR meeting?
Right. You need a background in order to facilitate the piece of the yoga practice itself. you need, and usually we've done this. We've done some very simple things with therapists and with, folks that work in the juvie detention center. We got a whole program around juvie hall and for that population, and for other populations, some very simple things. But primarily the way that this works is that a yoga teacher decides that they want to work in this capacity, in this domain, and they do the whole thing with the leadership training and the intensive. You need both parts, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The intensive connects yoga and the 12 steps in a very deep way. We call it a deep dive into yoga and the 12 steps for understanding and application. What had happened was there were a lot of people from the yoga community who said that they wanted to work in this population, but they had no real basis or understanding in the 12 steps or the 12-step process. And this particular, what we do in Y12SR is inevitably hooked to the 12-step program. And that's for two reasons. Number one, my teachers tell me don't teach what you don't know. So that's important. And the 12-step program is reaches a population that is, I'm very interested in reaching, that may not necessarily have a lot of resource, have a lot of money. You put $1 in the basket when you go to the 12-step meeting, right? So if you got it, you're more important than your money. And the Y12SR things are the same way. It's a donation-based. Sometimes they'll talk about a suggested donation that a yoga class costs this, and this.
Sure,
but
sure.
The statement is always made, you're more important than your money, right? Mm. So you can come to that class if you don't have money. It's no big deal to get the support and help.
That's right.
So you do the intensive. You can now do the intensive online, right? There's an online piece for that. But you do the leadership trainings in person. And those are the two pieces that allow you to become the Y12SR space holder. And again, primarily, we're seeing yoga teachers, and it's amazing when you when you just teach a regular yoga class, how many people are, and you know this, affected by, statistic is 1 in 3 are affected in some way in their lives by addiction. So you can believe that same statistic, and again, it may not be that the person in front of you is the person that's in the substance or the process addiction itself. But if you live in a household where addiction is present, then everybody is affected by it. Everyone, its tentacles go far and wide. Everyone's affected by it. So in a regular yoga class, you can believe that many of the folks in the room are affected by this disease.
And also very often the teacher as well.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Well, Nikki, thank you so much for sharing about Y12SR today. I just want to add my own personal thoughts, if you don't mind.
Oh, and I love it.
I think your program is top notch. I think it's timely. I think it's critically important, and I want to do everything I can to explain to viewers that if you're a yoga teacher. I want to really encourage you to take Nikki's training. It's only going to help you in your understanding of who's in the room. It's also going to help you in terms of your ability to help people in the world of addiction and recovery, and that's almost everybody these days at some level. And if you're not a yoga teacher but you want to get involved in this work, consider taking a yoga teacher training. Because it's really powerful, and then you can take Nikki's course as well and become somebody that holds space in a yoga context for people who are struggling with addiction and recovery. So that's what I would say about Y12SR right now. Nikki, thank you so much for lending your voice once again to the Recovery 2.0 conference.
Thank you, Tommy, and my God, thank you for your commitment to doing what you do to really, really, number one, take the stigma out of this thing. This is a disease. This is a disease like high blood pressure. It's a chronic disease. So the work that we're doing to take the stigma out of it so that more people will come get help is invaluable. This is a treatable disease. So I'm so blessed to be a part of the whole Recovery 2.0 movement. And you know, anything that I can do to support you, I'm all the way there.
Thank you, Nikki. And what's the website for people to get involved in Y12SR work?
It is www.y12sr.com. So come check it out. There's a listing there for all the meetings, the intensives, the leadership trainings, the whole deal.
Beautiful. Go check it out today, people. And we'll see you all down the road. Thank you, Nikki.
Love you.
Love you.